Hey, Restore Hearts family. I am your host and producer, Tierra Sharma. I am your favorite mental health mentor. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know that we have started our series, Overcoming Anxiety. And this week, we will be talking about the mindset of anxiety. This is episode 3, the mindset of anxiety. And so let's get started. So I want to talk about the 6 components of the soul because our mind is a part of the soul. And as I talk about the mindset of anxiety, there are 3 components of the soul that I believe are stronger. And when it comes to keeping anxiety rooted in our lives, and I believe that those are the mind, the emotions, and the imagination. So those are the ones that I want to highlight today. But just to give you an overview of the components of the soul, there are 6 components of the soul. So you have your mind, which is the center of our thinking. You have the will, which encompasses our desires and our intentions. You have intellect, which is knowledge, the ability to understand, think, and reason. You have emotions, which are strong feelings. They are subjective, which means that they are personal to us. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what anybody else feels, but it is specifically about how we feel and how we respond to a person, thing, or situation. Then we have the imagination, the act or power of forming a mental picture of something not present. And then we have our appetite, which is a craving, a strong desire or liking for something. And so when it comes to these components of the soul, the mind, the center of our thinking, when it comes to anxiety, what are we thinking about? What are we meditating on? What do we believe? And so we have to really do an assessment and think about, what are we thinking about? What are those things that we are thinking about that are adding to these feelings, to these emotions of anxiety in our lives? And then when it comes to will, our desires and intent. Do you have a desire to continue to live with anxiety? Now, most people would say no, but subconsciously, this is where we need Holy Spirit, because does it benefit you to be labeled anxious? Do you get attention from your loved ones, from your children, from your spouse, from those around you because you are anxious? Because you don't maybe have that relationship or not getting that attention that you may not get when you're not anxious? That's something, that's a heart check. And that's hard to admit, but that's something that we have to think about. Do you really desire to be free from anxiety? So that's something we must take into consideration. And then we have intellect. So intellect, when it comes to anxiety, I'll just give you a personal testimony about this one, because I am one who definitely during my pregnancy, more so during my second pregnancy, I definitely was challenged. See, I'm watching my language because language matters. It's definitely challenged with postpartum anxiety and really prenatal anxiety too, which I was able to hide from those around me. And so, because I'm a nurse, because I've gone to school, because I like to read the literature, see what it says, I intellectually knew that I was being challenged with anxiety once I started to understand what was going on. But I still did not seek help because I thought that, you know, how can I be anxious when I'm a healthcare provider? How can I be anxious when I'm coaching and teaching other people how to not be anxious? And so there's some things that you can mentally ascend to, and you can know that you have anxiety. But because I knew I had anxiety, I also uh, knew that, hey, this should go away. if I exercise, if I do these things that are supposed to help with anxiety, then maybe I won't have anxiety. It should pass. And so sometimes too much knowledge is not good, because then you kind of talk yourself into knowing too much. And this is a time where you need someone from the outside to be able to speak to you, because sometimes when you know too much, your brain is turning and your brain doesn't allow you to get help. So that's an example of intellect, how intellect can interfere and come in when it comes to anxiety. When it comes to emotions, remember, emotions are strong feelings. So really, this could be anything. I think emotions and fear, and emotions and imagination and fear, like this is a triad when it comes to emotions and imagination. I think they just play very strong on each other. And when it comes to fear, so strong emotions that you could have towards a person that help hold anxiety in place is maybe that feeling that you have towards an abuser, someone who abused you physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, and that causing you to feel fear in your body, fear in your mind when it comes to that person. So that's how that emotion can help anchor anxiety in your life. And then when it comes to a thing, now I don't know if you've ever seen, rest in peace Maury, but Maury Pokovich, he used to have on his show where people would come on and they would be so afraid of balloons, or they would be afraid of clowns, or they would be afraid of different things, and you would see how out of control those people, they were so afraid. And we used to laugh at that stuff, but it's really sad when you think back on it, because their imaginations, like we talk about imagination, the act or power of forming a mental picture of something not present. So yes, it was, these things may have been present right in front of them, but they had meditated on this thing, which comes to the mind. What are you meditating on? They meditated on this fear of that object for so long that now they have created this strong emotion towards the thing. And now there's this huge fear, this huge anxiety in their lives that is preventing them from living their best life. And then emotions towards a certain situation. Once again, that could be any circumstance. Maybe even with anxiety, it don't even have to be that deep. It's just whatever that anxiety and that emotion was to you. So maybe you missed the game-winning shot in the basketball game, and now because you lost, you have that feeling of sadness, and that makes you anxious about shooting another shot at the end of a game, because now there's this seed that's been planted. Remember, we talked about the seed in the first episode. There's been this seed planted that maybe now you're going to miss every game winning shot, even though you practice like 1,000 shots every week. So it could just be anything that the enemy can come in and try to plant in your life to get that stronghold of emotions, imagination, the mind, and put those things together to create and keep anxiety present in your life. And then we have appetite, craving, a strong desire or liking for something. So this is one that's going to be, once again, I said you have to really examine yourself about that. If you are being challenged with anxiety, what are you watching? What are you listening to? What are you feeding yourself through your eyes and through your ears? If you're challenged with anxiety, you should not be watching horror movies. If you're challenged with anxiety, you should not be listening to the news. You should not be listening to the news. You're not missing out on anything. We know there's so much stuff in the news that could cause and produce anxiety if you're already challenged with anxiety. And so you should probably cut off the news. There's certain family members who you might come around and every time they come around, you feel so much stress, but you continue to listen to them on the phone or send text messages back and forth. What are you feeding yourself? So that's a very personal question. You have to take an assessment of what are you feeding yourself that is helping to keep anxiety alive in your life. You need to starve it. So yes, these are the 6 components of the soul. And so I just wanted to give you a little information about those areas of the soul because the mind is a part of the soul. The next thing that you will be hearing is a teaching that I did on the mindset and anxiety. And so, with this information that we just went over about the soul, I encourage you to think about those 6 different areas of your life, 6 different components of the soul. And as I said before, make it personal. You have to make it personal to you. What are those things in your mind that you think that are helping to keep anxiety alive in your life? What knowledge are you taking in that is keeping anxiety alive in your life? What emotions are you entertaining that are keeping anxiety alive in your life? What are some of those desires in your heart that you have that are keeping anxiety alive in your life? What are you entertaining in your mind, in your imagination? What are you meditating on? What pictures are you forming in your mind and building based off the stories that you tell yourself that are keeping anxiety alive in your life? And what are you feeding yourself through your eyes and through your ears that are keeping anxiety alive in your life? So I want you to think about those things. I hope that you have your journal and your pen because we have to acknowledge these things and confront them if we want to live free from anxiety. So enjoy the rest of this episode. I will see you next week. Love you. Bye-bye. Next, we're going to talk about the mindset of anxiety. So your mind is a part of your soul. Your soul encompasses your mind, your will, your intellect, your emotions, your imagination, and your appetite. So when we talk about anxiety, anxiety is going to deal with the mind, it's going to deal with the emotions, and it's going to deal with the imagination. So these are the 3 parts of the soul that we really want to deal with when we're talking about the mindset of anxiety. And mindset is, what do you believe? So these are some of the questions that you're going to have to ask yourself about everything. What do I believe? This is going to require you to slow down and to acknowledge your thoughts and your emotions. So what am I thinking about? How does what I think about make me feel? And then what behaviors are being produced as a result of what I think and what I feel? So that's basically mental health. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And then what behaviors are being produced as a result of what I think and what I feel? That creates a mindset. So our language tells us where we are. It tells us what we believe. And this is why you have to examine and acknowledge every single thing that you think and every single emotion that you feel. Part of changing our mindset is going to be to acknowledge those thoughts and emotions so that we can interrupt the cycle. And we're going to interrupt that cycle by changing our language. And so, if you're a believer, we change our language with the word of God, and we can create affirmations and declarations that support this new mindset that we want to create. We're being transformed by the renewing of our mind. And it doesn't mean that you're going to do it in your own strength. This is not something you can do in your own strength. And that's why we talked about the spirit to begin with. We talked about the spirit of anxiety. You need the spirit of God to help you do this. That way you can start to create these new mindsets. And so just think about it. Without the proper tools and strategies, a lot of people are just trying everything that they know and then just wishing that something will work because they don't know what to do. And so that's what causes frustration. So we just want to keep that in mind as we're moving forward. And then as you're changing your language, one of those lies that we believe, a lot of us, especially in the Black community, believe growing up is that if you say something that isn't true, then you're lying. Well, in this instance, where you're putting in that work to change your mindset, to build new beliefs, we have to say where we're going. One of the scriptures that I was reading is Joel chapter 3, verses 10. And at the end of that verse, in the Voice translation, it says, "For this final battle, even the weakling must say, I am a warrior." So you may feel fearful, but your desire is to dismantle that mindset of fear. And so even though you might be feeling fear inside, you want to say that I am peace, or the opposite of fear in the spirit is love. I am love. I am loved. I am accepted. Whatever that rebuttal is for what you're feeling, you want to speak where you want to be, not where you are. So this gives you a new goal. It gives you a new target to move towards so that you're moving forward towards your goals. I wanted to bring that up because as you're starting this journey, you may not feel strong. You might not feel loved. You may not feel that you're in control. And by in control, I don't mean manipulation, those things that we talked about before. I mean that you have the power, the God-given power, authority, and dominion to rule over those emotions that come. And that is our mindset. We're addressing our mind, we're addressing our emotions, we're addressing our imagination. Now, something I want to tell you about imagination. Imagination doesn't have anything to do with what's going on outside of you. You have perception and you have imagination. Perception is something that you experience based on your five senses. Imagination comes from within you. It's what you tell yourself to make sense of what's going on. It's what you tell yourself to make sense of all those holes and gaps in the questions that you have. And it's our instinctive way of trying to make sense of things. And so you must address your imagination, because your imagination will tell you that the house is on fire and that you need to get out when nothing's happening. Your imagination will tell you that nobody likes you when that's not true. Your imagination will tell you that you should be fearful that your boss is going to lay you off during a recession when nobody's even talked about that. This is why we have to keep our imagination in check. We have to learn to address these thoughts that are coming from your imagination. The thoughts could be coming from something that your mama, your daddy, your grandma told you. Your thoughts could be coming from a demonic influence. Your thoughts could be coming from something that you watched on the TV, something you heard in the news, media. So right now, that's that's five voices. And not once did we mention the voice of God. So this causes a lot of confusion. Even as a believer, you'll say, well, I can't hear God. Well, that's because you got, at the minimum, five things talking to you. And so, no, you can't hear. See how all of these things mesh together. So if you're just focusing on one thing and not the complete holistic picture, you will feel very frustrated during this process. So I just always want to stress that you want to deal with the spirit, the mind, the body. We have to address each one. And so now we're talking about mindset. We talked about being in community. When we talked about the spirit, we talked about the fact that you need to be in communities where you're being covered in the spirit. So prayer groups and spiritual communities where people can cover you in the spirit. Well, same thing is true for your mind. You need to be in community with people who can call you out on your thoughts and emotions that don't align with where you want to be. You cannot do mental illness alone. We can't do life alone. But if there's no one in your life, no one in your circle who will actually correct you when you're thinking something inappropriately or when you're feeling something inappropriate to the situation, and you're willing to listen to that person and to be corrected in your thoughts and in your emotions, then you're not in the right community. You have to be in community with people who can help course correct you and get you on the right path. You have to respect them enough to listen to them, and you have to be willing to be wrong. Listen, this is the thing of humility, because if you just believe that you're right, if you're not willing to listen to a new way, you're going to have a very hard time building a new mindset that doesn't agree with anxiety. So community is so important in this journey. And this is going to require some hard decisions. You're going to have to disconnect from people, places, things, social media, news, even work environments. As nurses, as healthcare professionals, if you work in acute care, then you're working in very high stress work environments. That's something you have to think about. Do you necessarily have to do the job that you're doing right now? Is there a fear that you can't make money doing something other than what you're doing now? These are some of the questions you're going to have to ask yourself and ask God. You ask yourself to come into truth, but God has all our answers. So we want to make sure we're always asking God. And you need separation. Separation is required. So this is something you really have to ask God to prepare your heart for, because there's some people, some places, some things that you may have to separate that will cause grief. And you're going to need to be able to process through those emotions of separating from those things that are keeping you from healing. You have to be separated from the things that are triggering you, because you can't heal when you're being triggered every 2 seconds, every hour, every day. You're being triggered by the same people, places, and things that are increasing feelings of anxiety in you, and you don't have that separation so that you can breathe and not be in a state of always anxious, always being triggered by the person's presence or the environment's presence. These are some of the things you have to think about when it comes to mindset. And so next we are going to address the body.
of our Star Heart TD.
Life is a journey, and there are many moments. Some moments are smooth. You flow through them effortlessly. There are other moments when life's challenges interrupt your momentum, yet you find the strength to get back on track, to keep moving. So even if you have to crawl to make it there, do it, because victory belongs to you. You are equipped to handle every part of the journey. You were created to overcome this. Don't give up. I love you.